In 1513, a map surfaced that should not exist. It showed coastlines buried beneath ice, lands no human was supposed to have seen. Antarctica, mapped 3 centuries before its discovery. The creator claimed it was copied from far older charts, maps drawn by a civilization long erased from history. So how did ancient people chart the Earth with such precision? Without satellites, without aircraft, without modern science. And what else did they know? That we've forgotten? This is the story of the maps that challenge everything we thought we understood about the ancient world. Constantinople, 1929. Workmen are dismantling the old Topkapi Palace when they stumble upon a forgotten library. Inside, rolled in dust and silence, lies a collection of ancient manuscripts. Among them, a fragment of gazelleskin parchment, covered in precise coastlines and mysterious annotations. This is the Piri Reis map, and it would ignite one of history's most enduring mysteries. The map was created by Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer, in the year 1513. Only 1/3 of the original survives. But what remains is extraordinary. The fragment shows the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and various Atlantic islands. The level of detail is remarkable for its time. Coastlines curve with an accuracy that wouldn't be matched by European maps for decades. Mountain ranges in South America are depicted with striking geographic precision. The Andes appear as a chain of peaks running parallel to the coast, exactly where they should be. And written in the margins, in Piri Reis's own handwriting, is a claim that would echo through the centuries. He wrote that his map was compiled from more than 20 source charts, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, others even older. Maps, he claimed, that showed the world as it was seen by ancient eyes. But Piri Reis is not alone. In 1531, another map appears, the Oronteus Finaeus world map, created by a French mathematician and cartographer. This chart shows something that shouldn't be there. Antarctica, not as a blank space, not as speculation, but as a detailed continent, complete with mountains, valleys, and interior rivers. Drawn more than 300 years before the first confirmed sighting of Antarctica in 1820. The map centers the continent on the South Pole. It depicts mountain ranges in the interior, rivers flowing toward the coast, a level of geographic detail that seems impossible for the 16th century. Then there are the portolan charts, medieval navigational maps drawn on vellum, covered in rum lines radiating from compass roses. These charts show Mediterranean and Black Sea coastlines with startling accuracy. They were used by sailors for centuries. Captains relied on them to navigate between ports, to avoid reefs, to find safe harbor. But here's what doesn't add up. Portolan charts appear suddenly in the 13th century, fully formed. No crude early versions. They simply exist, as if copied from something far older. The earliest surviving example is the cartography, dated to around 1275. It shows the Mediterranean with such precision that modern scholars struggle to explain how it was created. Distances between ports are accurate. Angles are correct. Coastlines match reality with minimal distortion. This level of accuracy requires sophisticated surveying techniques. Historians have traced their origins backward, and the trail goes cold. The techniques used to create them remain unknown. Some researchers believe they were based on charts from the ancient Phoenicians, master sailors who dominated Mediterranean trade for over 1,000 years. Others suggest Roman sources, or even older ones, maps created by civilizations whose names we no longer remember. No one knows for certain, and these maps raise uncomfortable questions. How did medieval sailors possess geographic knowledge that surpassed what their technology should have allowed? Why do coastlines appear accurate to latitudes that require spherical trigonometry? Why are some portolan charts more accurate than maps created 300 years later? And most puzzling of all, why do some of these maps depict lands hidden beneath ice? To answer that, we need to understand the man who brought this mystery into the modern age. Piri Reis was not a fringe figure. He was not a mystic, and he was not guessing. He was a respected Ottoman naval officer, a veteran of Mediterranean warfare, a man who understood the sea because his life depended on it. Born around 1465 in Gallipoli, he came from a family of sailors. His uncle, Kemal Reis, was one of the most feared naval commanders in Ottoman history. Piri joined him at a young age. He learned navigation, seamanship, and the art of war on water. Together, they fought naval battles against the Spanish, the Venetians, and the Knights of Rhodes. They raided European ports, escorted Muslim refugees fleeing the Spanish Inquisition, and studied every map they could find. Because in naval warfare, knowledge of coastlines, currents, and hidden harbors meant the difference between victory and death. Piri Reis spent years compiling nautical knowledge. He collected charts from captured ships, interviewed sailors from different cultures, studied Greek, Arab, and European maps. In 1513, he created his famous map as a gift for Sultan Selim. It was a statement of Ottoman naval power and of geographic mastery. Later, he would write the Kitab-i-Bariyah, the Book of the Sea, a detailed maritime atlas used by Ottoman sailors for generations. Contained over 200 maps, descriptions of ports, anchorages, and navigational hazards. This was practical knowledge, earned over a lifetime at sea. This was not the work of a fantasist. This was a man committed to precision. So when Piri Reis claimed his map was based on ancient sources, scholars paid attention. In the margins of the map, he listed his references. Maps used by Christopher Columbus, Portuguese charts from recent explorations of Africa and Brazil, and older maps, much older, maps he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. One annotation is particularly intriguing. He mentions a map drawn by a man who had sailed to the New World, a map Columbus himself may have used. Some researchers believe this refers to a chart Columbus consulted before his famous voyage, a map that showed lands across the Atlantic, lands that officially did not exist yet. Others believe it points to something more unsettling: pre-Columbian voyages, explorers whose names are lost to history, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, or even earlier seafarers who crossed the ocean and returned with knowledge. What makes the Piri Reis map so controversial is not just what it shows, it's how accurate it is. When modern researchers compared the map to satellite data, they found something startling. The coastline of South America aligns remarkably well. The angle of the continent, the curve of the Brazilian coast, even the location of the Amazon River Delta, all present with striking fidelity. But there is a problem. One section of the map shows a landmass extending south from the tip of South America, a coastline reaching into regions no European had explored in 1513. Some researchers claim this is the northern coast of Antarctica, not as it looks today buried under ice, but as it may have appeared thousands of years ago, ice-free. This theory was first proposed by Charles Hapgood in his 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Hapgood was not a trained archaeologist. He was a professor of the history of science at Keene State College in New Hampshire. But he was drawn to anomalies, things that didn't fit the accepted narrative. And the Piri Reis map was one he couldn't ignore. Hapgood argued that this map, and others like it, were based on source charts created by an advanced ancient civilization, a people who mapped the world during a time when Antarctica was not yet frozen. He suggested these maps were passed down across millennia, copied and recopied by cultures that no longer understood their original meaning. Greek geographers, medieval cartographers, all unknowingly preserving fragments of ancient knowledge. Hapgood spent years comparing old maps to modern geography, and he noticed patterns, projection techniques too sophisticated for their time, coastlines too accurate to be accidental, mathematics that required spherical geometry. He proposed that the ancient civilization used a projection centered on Egypt, possibly based on the Great Pyramid of Giza, a coordinate system later copied and misunderstood. Errors accumulated, distortions crept in, but the underlying accuracy remained. Hapgood's work caught the attention of Albert Einstein. Einstein wrote a foreword to Hapgood's earlier book, Earth's Shifting Crust. He did not endorse the conclusions, but he did say the ideas were original and deserving of serious consideration. That endorsement mattered. Suddenly, the Piri Reis map was no longer a curiosity. It became evidence of something larger, a lost chapter of human history, a forgotten age of exploration and cartography. But before we accept that possibility, we need to ask a harder question. What was Antarctica actually like in the distant past? And could anyone have seen it before the ice? Antarctica was not always a frozen wasteland. Millions of years ago, it was part of the supercontinent Gondwana. Forests covered the land. Rivers cut through valleys. Life thrived. Dinosaurs walked its plains. Early mammals evolved in its forests. Freshwater flowed toward ancient seas. But around 34 million years ago, everything changed. The continent drifted south. Ocean currents shifted. Global temperatures dropped. Ice began to spread. Glaciers formed, expanded, and over millions of years, Antarctica became entombed beneath ice more than a mile thick. Today, 98% of the continent is buried. The ice sheet holds nearly 70% of the world's fresh water. If it were to melt entirely, sea levels would rise by more than 200 feet. Entire coastlines would vanish. But here is where the mystery deepens. Geological evidence suggests Antarctica's ice has not always been stable. Ice core data shows that the West Antarctic ice sheet has collapsed and reformed multiple times over the past few million years. During warmer interglacial periods, long pauses between ice ages, parts of the coastline may have been exposed. The most recent major interglacial period ended around 12,000 years ago. At the close of the last ice age, a time when sea levels were lower, when coastlines around the world looked very different, and when humans were spreading across the globe. If parts of Antarctica's northern coast were ice-free during this window, one question becomes unavoidable. Could ancient explorers have seen it? Could they have mapped it? This is the heart of the controversy. Supporters of the ancient map theory argue that the Piri Reis map shows the coastline of Queen Maud Land, not as it appears today, but as it may have existed before glaciation. They point to seismic surveys conducted in the 1950s by a joint British-Norwegian expedition. Using sonar, researchers mapped the subglacial terrain, the land hidden beneath the ice, mountains, valleys, and buried coastlines. When these results were compared to the southern portion of the Piri Reis map, some researchers claimed the match was too close to ignore. The contours align, the angles correspond, geographic features appear to mirror one another. In 1960, the United States Air Force commissioned an analysis of the map. Captain Lorenzo Burrows, working with the cartographic section, reviewed the findings. His conclusion was striking. He stated that the southern coastline appeared to represent the subglacial coast of Queen Maud Land, a coastline buried beneath ice for at least 6,000 years. If this interpretation is correct, the implications are profound. The source material for the map would have to be ancient, extremely ancient, possibly dating back to the end of the last ice age. That would imply the existence of a culture capable of long-distance ocean navigation, a culture that understood surveying, geometry, and map-making, thousands of years before the rise of Egypt or Sumer. And yet there is a problem. No such civilization has left clear archaeological evidence. No cities, no tools, no written records, only maps. And that absence matters, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This is where skepticism enters. Many geologists and cartographic historians argue the interpretation is flawed. They contend that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map is not Antarctica at all. It is South America, extended, distorted, and misunderstood. Renaissance cartographers often speculated about unknown regions. When coastlines ended, they guessed what came next. The Portuguese had explored much of Brazil by 1513. They knew the continent extended south. But how far south? No one knew. So mapmakers extrapolated. They filled gaps with logic, rumor, and assumption. This practice was common. The Piri Reis map may simply reflect that tradition. A southern coastline stretched too far, bent by projection errors, misread centuries later as something it was never meant to be. The Oronteus Finaeus map raises similar concerns. While it depicts a southern continent with mountains and rivers, its proportions do not match modern Antarctica. The western coast is too narrow. The eastern coast extends too far. Details are vague. Features are inconsistent. Historians argue it represents Terra Australis Incognita, the hypothetical southern landmass believed to exist for centuries. A philosophical idea, not a discovered continent. Ancient Greek thinkers believed in balance. If large landmasses existed in the north, land must exist in the south to counterbalance the earth. This belief survived into the Renaissance. Cartographers drew the southern continent not because they had seen it, but because they believed it had to exist. So we arrive at a crossroads. Are these maps remnants of lost ancient knowledge? Or are they products of Renaissance speculation, misunderstood through a modern lens? To answer that, we have to confront the debate directly. The debate over these maps has lasted for decades, and it remains unresolved. On one side are researchers who believe the maps preserve fragments of ancient knowledge. Figures like Charles Hapgood and Graham Hancock argue that the evidence points to something far older than the Renaissance. They highlight the precision of certain coastlines, the mathematical sophistication of the projections, and the sudden appearance of advanced cartography in medieval Europe. They ask difficult questions. How did 16th century cartographers depict coastlines that would not be accurately surveyed until the 20th century? How does the Oronteus Finaeus map show a southern continent centuries before its official discovery? Why do portolan charts appear fully formed, with no clear developmental history? And why do some of these maps rely on projection techniques that require spherical geometry? Hapgood believed the answer lay in inheritance, that medieval mapmakers were copying charts they no longer fully understood. Fragments passed down through cultures, translated, copied, distorted, but never entirely lost. Graham Hancock expanded this idea further. In Fingerprints of the Gods, he suggests these maps are remnants of a global maritime civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age. A culture capable of long-distance navigation, of precise surveying, of recording the world as it truly was. According to this view, cataclysmic events ended that civilization. Rising sea levels, climate upheaval, possibly even a cosmic impact. Their cities were destroyed, but their knowledge survived encoded in maps. Hancock points to additional anomalies. The Zeno map of 1380, which some interpret as showing Greenland before it was officially explored. The Bwatch map of 1737, depicting Antarctica divided into two landmasses by a channel, a detail later echoed by modern subglacial surveys. The Mercator map of 1569, which shows Arctic coastlines with striking accuracy. Taken together, supporters argue these maps form a pattern, a residual imprint of ancient geographic knowledge. But this interpretation demands a heavy price, because if such a civilization existed, the question becomes unavoidable. Where is everything else? On the other side of the debate stand mainstream historians, archaeologists, and cartographers. They argue the mystery is built on misinterpretation. They point out that the Piri Reis map is not as precise as it is often claimed to be. The South American coastline contains clear errors. Rivers are misplaced. Distances are compressed in some regions and stretched in others. The Amazon Delta is distorted. The Parana River appears too far north. These are not the marks of advanced global surveying. They are the marks of early modern cartography. Critics argue that projection errors explain much of the apparent accuracy. When distorted maps are rotated, stretched, or selectively aligned, patterns can appear where none were intended. As for the southern landmass, skeptics maintain it is simply South America extended too far. A speculative continuation of the coastline, a common practice at the time. The Oronteus Finaeus map, they argue, fares no better. Its depiction of the southern continent does not match Antarctica. The coastlines are inconsistent. The proportions are wrong. The interior details are artistic, not geographic. Mountains and rivers were often added to unknown lands for symmetry and visual balance. Not because they were observed. The mystery of the Portolan charts also has a conventional explanation. Historians argue these maps did not appear suddenly. They were the product of centuries of accumulated maritime knowledge. Roman merchants sailed the Mediterranean for hundreds of years. Byzantine navigators preserved classical geography. Arab sailors mastered the Indian Ocean. Venetian and Genoese traders refined coastal navigation. By the 13th century, this knowledge had coalesced. Portolan charts were practical tools, built from experience, not theory. Cartographic historian Gregory McIntosh has been particularly critical of the lost civilization hypothesis. He argues that many claims rely on selective comparison, highlighting similarities while ignoring discrepancies. In other words, confirmation bias. If ancient maps truly derived from advanced surveying, critics ask, why are they not more accurate? Why do coastlines drift? Why are mountains misplaced? Why are distances inconsistent? Why do these maps lack the internal consistency expected from precise global cartography? The skeptical answer is straightforward. Because they were not copies of perfect ancient maps. They were the best attempts of early modern mapmakers working with incomplete information. They reflect their time, nothing more. But even this explanation leaves something unresolved. Because while the skeptics dismantle the grand claims, they do not erase the mystery entirely. And that leads us to a quieter, more difficult question. What if the truth lies somewhere between these extremes? Perhaps the truth does not live at the extremes. Not in the idea of a lost supercivilization, and not in the claim that these maps are nothing more than guesswork, but somewhere in between. Because even if the Piri Reis map does not depict an ice-free Antarctica, it still tells us something important. By the early 16th century, geographic knowledge was far more interconnected than we often assume. Piri Reis did not work in isolation. He had access to charts from many traditions. Arab navigators who had sailed the Indian Ocean for centuries. Portuguese explorers returning from Africa and the New World. Italian and Byzantine sailors preserving Roman geographic knowledge, and possibly older sources we can no longer identify. This was not the work of a single culture. It was a network, a web of shared information spanning continents and generations. And that web extended deeper into the past than we usually acknowledge. Ancient sailors were not naive. The Greeks and Phoenicians were exceptional seafarers. They explored the Mediterranean, the Atlantic coast of Africa, and possibly beyond. Around 500 BCE, Hanno the navigator sailed south along the African coast. He returned with accounts of rivers, mountains, and unfamiliar animals. Some historians believe he reached as far as modern-day Cameroon. Greek scholars understood the earth was round. Around 240 BCE, Eratosthenes calculated its circumference. His estimate was remarkably accurate, within a few % of modern measurements. He achieved this using geometry, astronomical observation, and reports from travelers. In the 2nd century CE, Ptolemy introduced a coordinate-based mapping system, latitude, longitude, a framework that allowed geography to be expressed mathematically. His maps contained errors, but the method was sound, and knowledge like this does not vanish overnight. It is copied, translated, Adapted. The Library of Alexandria once held thousands of works on geography and navigation. Texts written by Greek, Egyptian, and Phoenician scholars. When the library was destroyed, much was lost. But not everything. Fragments survived. Maps were redrawn. Charts were updated. And pieces of ancient understanding filtered forward through time. This does not require a forgotten global civilization. It requires something far more ordinary and far more human: curiosity, exploration, and the slow accumulation of knowledge. But what about Antarctica? Could ancient sailors have seen it? The honest answer is simple: unlikely, but not impossible. A ship blown off course. Explorers pushing beyond familiar waters. A brief warming period exposing parts of the southern coastline. Under the right conditions, a distant shore could have been glimpsed, recorded, and later misunderstood. A chart copied by people who no longer knew what it truly represented. That chart could be distorted over centuries, stretched by projection errors, bent by assumption, until it became something else entirely. This explanation requires no advanced lost civilization, only chance, skill, and time. But it leaves room for uncertainty, because the truth is we do not know. We do not know how far ancient sailors traveled. We do not know what maps they created. And we do not know how much knowledge has been lost. What we do know is this: the Piri Reis map, the Oronteus Finaeus map, and the Portolan charts are real. They were created by real people, using information we can no longer fully trace. And that alone is remarkable. They remind us that history is not a straight line, that progress is fragile, and that knowledge can disappear as easily as it is gained.